Okay, good morning everyone. For anyone who doesn't know, Dallas North is in Broadmeadows. We're a very small school with just 5 composite classes, and like many other schools here, or represented here, we have high EMA, high ESL and an SFO of 8.6. Our strategic plan priorities, because so many of our children enter school without having a good grasp of English, sometimes any grasp, enter without kinder or playgroup experience, are always literacy and numeracy. And when the AIZ came along with literacy, numeracy and behaviour management, we thought, wow, 3 priorities all at once, we have to be part of this. So Julie began in our first year and she was our nominated learning leader. And our principal made it possible this year for Leanne to join in the team. And then term 2 this year I came along as well. And my job has basically been to ensure that sufficient meeting time was allocated at school and to make sure that meeting time wasn't hijacked. So at times it's been a tussle. I've heard John talk about not talking about where the rubbish bins are and things like that, and it's been my job to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, Julie and Leanne have done some fantastic work with teachers and with students, and the teachers have responded really well, and I think you'll see that the students have too. So I'll hand over to Julie.
Thank you. So like Denise mentioned, I'm in the 3-4 area and I was the initial person for the AIZ, and then I had the others come on board, which has worked really well because we've kept on task and addressed all the issues. I'd like to start with, at the start, like all of you, I felt overwhelmed with all the information and I'd report back to the 3 to 6 area. But this year, because of the small numbers, I've managed to do it as a whole school, which is great because all the staff get the information at the same time and therefore use it. Last year we dedicated 2 curriculum days to literacy for the 7 high reliabilities, and that gave the staff the opportunity to familiarise themselves with the terms as well as putting them in practice. So that was a success. We also allowed some class observation time. So the staff were welcome in Leanne or myself in our classrooms to see how it looks, how literacy looks, and the 7 high reliabilities. Earlier this year we focused on the literacy planner because staff became familiar with the 7 high reliabilities, so we thought, okay, it's time to look at our planner, and that's what we did. So we decided to keep it specific, clear and consistent throughout the school, so from levels 1 right through to level 4. And with that we just looked at what we want the students to know by each term, therefore what the teachers need to teach by each term. We initially surveyed the staff on how they implement the 7 high reliabilities late last year, and you can see there was quite a few that said never, but when we discussed it further it was not that they didn't teach it, they didn't use that terminology. So we got together as staff and decided we need a common language throughout the school. So now it is, and you can see the data there, everyone is using the same language, doesn't matter what grade you're in. So any teacher could walk in, use the language, the students will know what you're talking about. Now I'll pass you on to Leanne and she'll discuss John's visit at our school.
John Munro visited our school on Tuesday the 31st of March, and we had the privilege to allow John to watch myself and Julie use the 7 high reliabilities in the grade 1, 2 and the 3, 4 grade. After we had done the lessons, we received feedback from John and further direction. John then had the opportunity to walk through the classrooms and talk to the children and to the teachers. We then also had the opportunity to sit down and show John our plan and what we had worked on previous to his visit, as Julie mentioned. But the main points that came out of our discussions and observations with John in the Prep to 2 area, that oral language needed to be and should be the main focus. John said our children had the knowledge but needed the vocabulary to express their meaning, which previously they didn't have. Our children needed to build sentence knowledge, pronounce and spell new words. John said a strategy in supporting development of oral language is to task the children to respond to questions in sentence format. The unit of meaning is the sentence. In the grade 3 to 6 area, the focus needed to be on morphographic knowledge, so how to spell words and what they mean, and sound knowledge. So in response to John's advice, we reviewed and amended again our literacy plan to include speaking and listening and the oral language. So again in the same format for each term, what the students need to know and what the teachers need to be teaching in order to reach those expectations. We also amended the reading section of our plan, not just to include the 7 high reliabilities, but to also include fluency, comprehension and questioning from Lorraine's PD sessions. As well as the speaking and listening, we included a spelling continuum under each of the areas: letter knowledge, phonological awareness, high frequency words, visual strategy, meaning. So we knew exactly what we needed to teach the children at each level. Also, as after the visit, we thought the parents really need to know what their children are doing at school during school time. So the best way to do this, we thought, was to have a school newsletter. So this was published and this was sent out to the parents. And we just gave a brief introduction of what the high reliabilities were, what they could do at home to help their child. And that's an example. As we sent the newsletter home, we also sent home a survey for the parents to do. And we asked, does your child talk to you about John Munro? And it was about half. Does your child explain any of the procedures to you? And at least all of them were addressed in some way. Will you trial these procedures with your child at home? So if they know what they are, you can help your child at home, and they all said that they would. And have you noticed any improvement in your child's reading? A majority said yes. So, after all is said and done, how has this impacted on our children? We have 2 examples for you. So these are responses from 2 children. The first is from a more confident reader, and she says, when I get my knowledge ready, I think about what is going to happen in the story. I look at the picture, put the picture in my head. When I get asked for a question, I think of ones that I think will be answered in the book. When I see new vocabulary, I use meaning-making motor and letter cluster generator. Meaning-making motor means I read the sentence again. Letter cluster generator means I can see a little word in a big word. When I paraphrase, I change the word but not the meaning. I summarise after the story. I summarise the main ideas. I review at the end of the story and say what I have learnt, and I answer the questions. I read aloud to remember the story. I read aloud to link the ideas in my mind. The second example is from a boy who has previously struggled a bit with his reading, and this is his response. When I get my knowledge ready, I say what I know. When I do a question, it needs to be answered in the book. When I see a new word, I read the sentence again and try to think of a word that's the same. I put the sentence in my own words. After the story, I say the important things in the story. When I review, I say what I learnt. Lastly, we'd like to show you a DVD of another way we think this has impacted on our children.